Welcome to the OVW podcast, the unofficial podcast of Ohio Valley Wrestling. My name is Jack Minoaks.
And I'm Brian Hines.
It's a Monday in the feed. You know what that means. It's time for another interview. We're sitting down today with blogger, writer, wrestling historian, John Cosper. Did I miss anything?
No, that did well.
Okay. So we are going to get into kind of like the history of OVW and kind of a small part of the history of kind of wrestling in Louisville. But I really want to start with you. Like you obviously have this huge passion for wrestling. You've spent a lot of time around wrestling, a lot of time around wrestlers, dedicated a huge part of your life to producing,
Much to my wife's chagrin. Although she gave me permissions when I got started.
Wait, I thought it was a love and a passion we all share.
Right. Well,
But how did you get into wrestling? I assume you started as a fan, right?
Oh yeah. I started as a fan. As a kid, this will date me, but it was the rock and wrestling era.
Mm-hmm.
It was seeing Mr. T and Cyndi Lauper, whom I both loved, all of a sudden showing up with all these wrestlers and trying to convince my parents to let me watch, Superstars on Saturday morning. My grandfather was a big fan. My dad was not. My mom definitely was not. And finally, one Saturday morning, we turned it on, and the very first thing I remember seeing was Randy Savage with that robe and Pomp and Circumstance and Miss Elizabeth. And my dad going, "This is ridiculous! Like, this is the coolest thing I have ever seen." So, got into it then, and actually, it was funny. We moved to Texas for a couple years, then moved up here. Of course, this was the number 2 town in the Memphis territory at the time, the late '80s. But I was every afternoon I was watching World Class Championship Wrestling on ESPN and the Von Erichs and the Freebirds. So,
Okay.
Definitely as a kid became a fan.
So it was Tuesday nights for the Memphis Wrestling in Louisville, right?
Yes. Yep.
Did you ever make it to any of those shows?
Never made it to any of those shows. No.
And now that you're a wrestling historian in Louisville wrestling specifically, are you filled with chagrin a little bit?
Yeah, I never would have made it back then just because my parents, we would not have been able to make that. I do kick myself because I knew what was going on in Jeffersonville, and I didn't make it over there until that first class was gone. So first night I went was the night Kurt Angle came in to wrestle the Damager. They brought Batista back that night to work a special match. They brought Shelton Benjamin back that night. I got to meet Molly Holly that night, who was my huge crush at that time. So
everyone's really.
That was pretty darn cool. But no, I missed that whole era where they were in Jeffersonville, and then with that first class. And when you think about who you could have gone to watch for free on a Wednesday night TV taping, back then it's outrageous.
It's staggering, really.
So what was kind of the landscape, number 2 town from the Memphis territory, and then national expansion kind of happens. Memphis is around for a little bit, and then that kind of dries up. What was kind of like a brief history of wrestling in Louisville in between like the height of Memphis and then like the start of Ohio Valley Wrestling?
So the exact dates I couldn't really tell you because they really sort of almost overlap. And what really happened was after Memphis went away, you really had 2 promotions rise up. You had OVW, which was initially was a Nightmare Academy. It was initially over in Portland. Then they moved over to Jeffersonville to the Quadrangle, and then you had Ian Rotten who opened up shop with IWA Mid-South in Louisville, ran in the old Kmart building. They're the reasons of course the stricter rules about blood in Kentucky and everything like that happened. Right. There's a whole expose. That's a whole other can of worms we could get into and stuff like that. When John Bull came in with a smiling face to do a story on wrestling and they made it all about the blood and violence. But within a couple years, everything flip-flopped. IWA got kicked out of Kentucky. OVW moved to Kentucky and kind of said, and of course they've been at 4400 Shepherdsville Road ever since. So. But yeah, it was kind of a there was definitely a void, and and Louisville's Louisville's history and love affair with wrestling goes back over 100 years, and there was a bigger gap from about 57 to 1970 when the Island Athletic Club unfortunately went under. Dick the Bruiser tried to run for a couple years, didn't really pan out. So really it was about 7 years that the town was completely dark and there really was no wrestling. But fairly quickly, right after Memphis folded, fans found themselves either, again, at the Kmart building, they found themselves at the Quadrangle and they were watching IWA or they were watching OVW at the time.
That just sounds so unnatural, Louisville being without wrestling.
Right.
Yeah.
So I get excited every time. Of course, this past week they did their Tuesday night show because it's WrestleMania week. And nobody's going to be in town on Thursday. So anytime they do it on a Tuesday night, I always think that's great because that's the tradition, and that's going back not just with Memphis wrestling, that's going back to 1935 with the Allen Club.
That almost sounds as unnatural as having wrestling in a Kroger, or not a Kroger, a Kmart.
Right.
I'm trying to just wrap my head around that.
It used to be a Kmart building, so yeah, it was quite a. Again, a story in and of itself. So, but a lot of the guys we enjoy at OVW. I mean, that's where Isaiah got started. That's where Cash Flow got started, and a lot of they cut their teeth in that building as well. So,
Wow.
What do you think makes Louisville such like a hotbed for professional wrestling?
I think the depth of the history is a big piece of it. Again, I mean, this is the town that gave Ed Strangler Lewis his name. Story goes back January of 1913. He was booked on a show in Louisville as he was kind of coming up at the time, but he was going by the name Robert Frederick. His real name was Robert Friedrich, and he no-showed. And so 2 weeks later, when he finally makes it into Louisville, I don't know if it was weather related or whatever, but the promoter's like, well, I can't send you out as Robert Frederick because you didn't show up 2 weeks ago. We sent this guy over here out as Robert Frederick. So on the fly, his name got changed to Ed Strangler Lewis as a nod to another. He was from Wisconsin. It was a nod to another wrestler named Evan the Strangler Lewis from Wisconsin. So Ed Strangler Lewis went out, and between Louisville and Lexington, I mean, he really developed a following, and there was a really strong wrestling was all in the theaters at the time, and that was the time when they started a Derby Eve tradition as well of having a wrestling show in the 19-teens, and even through World War I, was very popular. So and then you moved to the 1920s, it moves into the theaters downtown. The burlesque and vaudeville theaters were offering competing wrestling shows, and politics got involved, and they were going after each other and stuff. 1935, Haywood Allen has a dispute with the owner of the Savoy Theater. Allen was the booker, breaks off. He starts the Allen Athletic Club. Within a couple years, the Savoy Theater, the Savoy Athletic Club goes under. The Allen Athletic Club runs for another 22 years. Allen ran it for 10 years. He sold it out to his partners, Francis and Betty McDonough. They carried it on for another, he sold out for 12 years, and they carried it on for another 10 years until Francis passed away. So, I mean, the tradition is just ingrained. It's just in, and they were drawing, back at the Columbia Gym, that building would have seated 3,000 people. So every week, and Betty McDonough was a very, very shrewd business lady, and she knew every wrestling fan in town. She knew who liked the wrestling bears. She knew who liked the wrestling ladies. She knew who liked the wrestling midgets, and she knew how to pick up the phone and go, "Hey, guess who's coming to town this week? Do you want tickets? This and that." She worked very hard along with Haywood Allen's wife to get the ladies coming to the shows. There were a lot of ladies coming every week at the gym, and it was a dress-up occasion too. It wasn't we weren't all showing up in black T-shirts at the Columbia Gym back then.
Right.
You had your dress, you had your suit on, and occasionally they would get mad and they would throw the seat cushions in the ring, and next week they were banned from selling seat cushions. So.
What's a moment that wrestling fans should know about from that era of Louisville wrestling?
Oh gosh. I'm not sure on one particular moment. And it really kind of depends on what kind of fan you are and what kind of moments you're looking for.
Well, what's one of your favorites?
Yeah. I think the big shows from the 1950s. Every year, the big show in the spring was a benefit for the police. Orphans and Widows Fund, and it was a big event. It was held. These were some of the first really big shows held at what became Louisville Gardens. It was still the Armory at the time, and they would bring in Luthez, they would bring in Barry Leone, they would bring in Mildred Burke, the Black Panther Jim Mitchell, who was from Louisville. He came back and worked one of the shows in the 50s. So, and that was when supposedly they would have almost 7,000 people in that building, which was beyond the capacity of what Memphis could do later. But with Memphis, of course, they had renovated the building. They put in air conditioning. They put that ugly drop ceiling. Some of the photos of that building when had that arched roofway and you did not have that ugly drop ceiling and everything like that building was spectacular on the inside. So those are some of the neat moments. And they had again, it really just kind of depends on what kind of wrestling you would enjoy. I said the Wrestling Bears always came to town. There was one night that a tag match that was a semi-main event didn't go the way the fans wanted. The fans were stomping and yelling upstairs. The Bear would not come upstairs for the main event, so they had to call the show early. A really funny incident happened. This was right after Allen went into business for himself in 1935. There was a feud between the Allen Club and the Savoy Club. And the Savoy Club held a mud wrestling match, which had never been held in Louisville before. And the fans just ate it up. They thought it was great. So Haywood Allen's fans were like, "Hey, you need to have a mud wrestling match too." And Haywood Allen said, "I'm going to do better than their mud wrestling match. We're going to wrap the ring in cellophane. So nobody's going to get splashed with mud." So like an hour and a half, they stopped the show and trying to hang the cellophane, and Haywood Allen's cussing and smoking and pacing in the back of the room, and just furious because it's taking them forever. As soon as the match starts, the cellophane's falling down. There's mud everywhere and stuff like that. It's like, yeah, you won a mud match. I'm never putting on another mud match ever again. So, yeah, just kind of a disastrous night. But
was there a lot of that kind of like keeping up with the Joneses during their kind of rivalry?
Now, I'd say the rivalry only lasted a couple years. It was only about 3 years. I mean, really, Allen knew the fans. He knew the fans extremely. He had built the Savoy Club into what it was. And there was a dispute over money after the Derby Eve show in 1935 that led to the two of them parting ways. So, and every now and then you would have somebody rise up and try to run. At one point, they moved things from the Columbia Gym to, I want to say they were trying to run the Armory at the time, Allen was. And so somebody else opened the Columbia Athletic Club and started running at the Columbia Gym, and they were bringing in guys like Don Eagle and Tug Carlson and things like that. But you know, again, for the most part, nobody came in and tried to run against Allen because you couldn't run against Allen. He just owned the town at the time and just had his finger on the pulse of what the fans wanted.
Sure. Sounds like you mentioned he knows the guys, knows what every fan is looking for depending on what kind of fan they are.
Yeah, that was Betty. Yep.
That's like still to this day, like one of my favorite ways to describe wrestling, or at least my favorite wrestling shows, is as a buffet. Right, there's a little bit. You might not be a steak guy. They got fish. Like
that's a good point.
There's something for everybody, and like really, those are some of the most fun wrestling shows to go to, and it's kind of one of my favorite things going back through wrestling history is seeing how long these ideas have been around. There really is. In almost all art, there's nothing new, but in wrestling, there's a lot of overlap.
Oh yeah. I always tell young wrestlers too, and I've given away a lot of copies of, the Elvira Snodgrass biography or the Black Panther, whatever. It's like, go back and learn about these people. There's gimmicks and there's things that they did in the 60, 70 years ago people haven't seen in 60, 70 years, and you can bring it back, and it's completely original and completely new.
So how did you get started writing about wrestling?
I got the idea to write a book about wrestling in Louisville, and it was I had become a fan of reading about wrestling. I had a roommate for a short time before I got married who brought in his wrestling library, so that's when I read Mick Foley's Have a Nice Day. Foley is Good. I read Lawler's book. I read Bobby Heenan's book and a bunch of others, and enjoyed the stories behind wrestling. And I was kind of looking around for something new to do. I had been doing theater as an after-school thing at Christian Academy of Southern Indiana for a while, and I left that and really just was kind of looking for something new and creative to do.
Sure.
And, one day at lunch, I told my wife, I was like, I'm thinking about writing a book about wrestling in Louisville. Nobody's done one. And she told me to go for it. So, again, much to her chagrin.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Still doing it all these years later. But I spent about a year and a half working on that particular book.
What was that one? What was that one called?
Bluegrass Brawlers.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and that's and there's actually the second edition is now out. It covers 1877 all the way up through just a couple years ago.
Yeah, and the new one has like Billy Starks on the front.
Yes.
Stuff.
Yeah.
So it is very updated,
very
up to date.
Well, yeah. As soon as I update it, of course, OVW gets sold a couple more times, and the Netflix documentary happens, so the history continues
Volume
to
3.
evolve. And then I do think the final nail in the coffin with the IWA happened before that one came out. I think the Jake Chris promo did, but again, that's their promotion. That's not OVW. Yeah, I spent about a year and a half working on that. I introduced myself to Jim Cornett at a comic book show. We struck up a friendship. He came to the library with me a couple times, as well as digging through the old microfilms. I give Jim credit for really kind of triggering my interest in Elvira Snodgrass, because we came across an ad for Cousin Elvira, and he could not stop laughing. He just loved the idea there was this hillbilly woman gimmick, in the early 1940s when nobody had character gimmicks.
Right.
And she really came by it honestly. She married Elmer Snodgrass for a very brief time, and he was doing the hillbilly gimmick, so she picked it up and she just kept the name even after they divorced. But got to know Kenny Bolin, and a friend of mine got me an interview with Danny Davis and Rip Rogers, and just anybody I could talk to over the year, from OVW I would talk to. Did as much Memphis research as I could as well, and just trying to piece together at the time about 120 years worth of about 130 years worth of history. So that was kind of my gateway into it. I ended up writing a book shortly thereafter when I started going out to independent wrestling shows and fell in love with indie wrestling. I wrote a book called Eat, Sleep, Wrestle, which became the name of my website and my company.
And your shirt.
Yeah, exactly. Just wanting to kind of share that love and appreciation with other people to give the indie wrestling a chance. And it just kind of snowballed from there. I did Kenny Boland's book, and then other people started approaching me. And the stories that I had found in working on Bluegrass Brawlers that I wanted to know more about. I wanted to know more about the Black Panther, Jim Mitchell. I ended up writing his biography and Elvira Snodgrass's biography. And then Elvira led me to Mars Bennett, which led me to June Byers. And there's a couple other ladies that I'm interested in writing some historical bios on. So it's just kind of snowballed from there. And then the blog kind of naturally happened just because I had the website. And last couple of years, Slam Wrestling gave me the opportunity to start publishing some articles. And I was like, all right, well, I'm going to promote people that I like. And a good chunk of them have been OVW folks. I've got a chance to I've talked to Cash Flow twice for the website, and Luke Curtis, Tony Evans, Freya the Slaya, Maria and Haley, when they have started their WoW run, we kind of did a talk about that. Shalance Royale, who I deeply miss at OVW.
So you and me both.
Yeah, so do we.
She was probably one of my favorite interviews so far.
When I interviewed her, we talked for 90 minutes on the phone, and half of that time it was about opera.
I can totally believe that.
Yeah. She's wonderful. So I miss that lady.
So when did the first edition of Bluegrass Brawlers come out?
2014.
So we've been writing for almost a decade, or over a decade. I was taking time away from you.
The first, say December of 2012, OVW show. I went to Joe Wheeler. We talked about retirements and how retirements don't stick, right? Oh, that may have been the last podcast I did. I was there the night that Joe Wheeler retired, which Joe Wheeler has unretired multiple times since then. But that was the start of the first book, and the start of the second edition kind of recap that whole thing and then talk about everything Joe Wheeler has done since then. 2 years. Joe's a wonderful guy. Joe's a boy. If Joe ever would sit down and do a book, I mean, the stories that man can tell, because of course he goes back to refereeing in Memphis, and he was the OVW senior official for years and years, and travels around. And still, I mean, I spent the last year actually behind the scenes at Grindhouse and going to their locker room and going to their classes and things like that. And one night after a show, they're like, "Hey guys, we got a special guest," and Joe Wheeler. I didn't know Joe was at the show. They bring Joe Wheeler in, and that just happened to be the night Dallas Edwards, who you guys probably know from OVW. This was July. It was 100 degrees outside.
Yes, it was.
It's always 5 or 10 degrees hotter inside the arena in Jeffersonville. Dallas refereed 11 matches in a row all by himself.
Wow.
He was freaking Captain America. So I could do this all day, and to get the rub from Joe telling him what an outstanding job he did, that was really quite a moment. So
Dallas definitely brings it's like a very much an air of professionalism to his refereeing. Like his facial expressions and like the way that his lines with his body are very, very like direct and very, very television ready. And I always really enjoyed Dallas in this short amount of time that he's been at OVW, getting to see him referee.
He's outstanding. And he's the one that Ronnie pointed to multiple times. Ronnie Roberts, who's the senior trainer over at a lot of OVW friends will remember him. But Ronnie will point him out that kid's going to make money. He's going to make a lot of money in this business. And what you guys may not know about him, do you guys remember the TV show The Goldbergs?
Yes.
Yeah. Do you remember the spinoff show Schooled?
No.
Okay. There was a spinoff show with the daughter, I think that was set in the 90s, where she was a school teacher. Dallas Edwards was on that show.
So we had gotten told that he was a child star, but we heard it from Zachary D. Pittman, and we assumed that he was joking because most of the time when he's around, he's just joking. I
understand not wanting to listen to ZDP and anything he has to say. So, I've known ZDP, by the way, since he started. I did my first story about Grindhouse. I don't know where it's gone to. I tried looking for it the other day, but I interviewed him when he was like a month into training with Rudy Switchblade over there at Grindhouse Pro Wrestling, and to see where he's gone, and I don't know. He's a successful reporter right now. I haven't seen Zachary save it. I haven't seen ZDP wrestle himself, but that Super Z guy's all right.
Yeah, he's all right. So you mentioned before your first OVW show. Can we recap that for a moment?
Sure. Yeah. So it was the first time I went. A friend of mine went over. We found out Kurt Angle was going to be there, and this was right when Damage had won the right, I think, to enter the Royal Rumble. Whoever won something at OVW would get to be in the Royal Rumble, and for some reason, I think that ended up not actually happening. But yeah, we went over that night specifically to see Kurt Angle. While we're waiting in line outside, a limousine pulls up, and here comes Jim Ross. So
That's
Jim Ross
cool.
came out and got a promo.
Oh,
wow. Shelton Benjamin wrestled. I don't remember the guy's name. In a dog collar match. Batista was out there in a tag match. One of the things that struck me that night, too, of course, I'm a proud New Albany High School graduate, class of 93. When I first moved here, we got tickets, we moved it up from Texas to Indiana. We're in Indiana. This is high school basketball country.
Right.
So we got season tickets to the high school basketball game. I remember watching Rob Conway on that New Albany High School team. He was part of a group of 5 seniors that the coaches started playing as starters as sophomores and kind of built into this power, hoping to make a state run, which unfortunately didn't happen. But they introduced Bowling Services, and I hear the name Rob Conway, and I'm like, is that the same Rob Conway from New Albany High School? And lo and behold, it was. So I've run into him a couple times since then. I mean, real proud of everything that guy's accomplished. He's actually held the NWA World Championship in its current form while he was wrestling for Japan more days than I don't want to drop names. It'd be wrong here, but some of the bigger names that have held that NWA title, he's held it for more days than they did, and he's a 2-time NWA World Champion. So, Rob Conway was wrestling that night. I think I saw Canyon. I can see the guy's face, and I don't remember his name, showing something or other. Another guy with Bowling Services. Of course, my first introduction to Kenny Bolin. We actually sat next to Christopher Bolin, and Chris, and he caught us up on a lot of inside stuff that night. And, Molly Holly was there. We hung around the parking lot long enough so when Molly came out and got a photo with her. We met Chris Nowinski, Dr. Chris. I guess he's Dr. Chris Nowinski now, one of the foremost authorities in the country on sports concussions. And everything.
CTE.
But, we talked to him. We had literally just watched his episode of Blind Date like a week or two before.
Blind Date. Now you're really dating. Yeah, there we go.
Now
yeah.
we're dating me. So.
Yeah.
Was telling my kids about those shows the other day. I was like, Blind Date was great, but Eliminate, that's when
Eliminate was my favorite. Eliminate was my favorite.
I will admit I've pulled those up on YouTube before. So, that was my first time. I do have the program somewhere. I thought I had it in this binder right here, and I don't know where it's going to. I know I haven't gotten rid of it. It's somewhere. But I went to, I would maybe hit it maybe once a year for a good long while. I remember seeing young Cody Runnels with dark hair. I remember the first time seeing Beth Phoenix and going, holy crap, why is she still here?
Right.
She's ready. I mean, and she was just, oh man, she just exuded stardom. I think the second time I went, JBL and Mark Henry were there. I remember Mark Henry coming out and collected for a charity they were doing, and got to see JBL throw a clothesline on somebody, and about 15 feet away, I could feel that clothesline. It was as brutal in person to watch as you see it on TV. Actually, probably more brutal in person because you're hearing that smack.
Yeah,
loud. So
meat on meat.
That was also the night. Yeah, I think they were tagging up against Basham and. Which he was the Machine at the time of the Damage, and that was the night poor Jackie Gata, who everybody remembers from Tough Enough. This old couple sitting in front of us the entire time Jackie Gata is out there. They got their middle fingers up in the air, and they would not stop chanting, "Hot tub ho, hot tub ho," the entire time that poor girl was out there. I was like, come on. So, very memorable night.
So, what was the? I know you weren't there. You're kind of telling us when you got into OVW, but you've done enough research, I'm sure. What was the true impetus for bringing WWE to OVW and making OVW be the training school?
Jim Cornett was sick of living in Connecticut, I think.
That's what I'd always heard, but I never heard how.
Jim
I didn't
Cornett
know how
was
true
sick
that
of living
was.
in Connecticut. They needed, and I mean, there was nowhere to train wrestlers. There was nowhere to prepare wrestlers for the next level. By killing the territories, they killed the place where everybody, learned how to be a wrestler. And, Danny had started the school in Louisville. Jim was from Louisville. It was kind of a natural fit. Jim started to send some feelers out and things like that. And he ultimately persuaded Jim Ross, hey, let's, let me go home. Let me partner up with Danny and start sending the trainees here. And so that I think we have Jim Cornette to thank for it, for sure.
I'd always heard him put it that way, but I was like, surely it wasn't that simple. But
Oh no, Jim hated Connecticut. Jim hated corporate life.
Yeah.
Jim wanted to be home. So
you spent some time throughout your research years with Jim Cornette.
occasionally, yes.
he's kind of has this reputation now for being, he's always had a reputation for being outspoken and plain spoken and getting to the point and maybe getting to the point in a really aggressive, angry way. Was there, I guess the question I want to ask is like, surely that's for a microphone, for a camera, right? Like there's got to be an element where he's playing a character, or
like, does he ever turn off?
Or is that always him?
That's him. But it's only him when he gets triggered.
Sure.
I mean, it's really him when he gets triggered. If something comes up political or something, doesn't go his way at a fast food drive-thru or whatever. Although I think Chris Jericho is really actually the one to blame for Dairy Queen, from what I've heard. But I mean, Jim's
he was certainly back there laughing it up during that video.
Jim's a very generous guy. With his time, he's always been very generous with me. He's been a great friend. He's been a great supporter, a great encourager. Always willing to share information, and that's really the wrestling. The guys that love wrestling history, the guys that write about it, and not just the guys that write about it, but then guys like Tom Burke up in New England who they just collect things. Everybody's very generous with their time. Everybody's very generous with their material. If I know somebody's working on something or whatever that I can help out, I actually have every Louisville wrestling result going all the way back to 1900, all the way up through 1963 when Dick the Bruiser pulled out and went dark. I've got every show that I could possibly find recorded. And I've shared it with a few people, there's like, they're looking for things or whatever. Somebody says, hey, did somebody work Louisville? I can go and just do a quick search of that document. I can find the names. So that's just the culture, is just everybody wants to share because, and, wrestling journalism has really only been around in its current form, where we're chronicling the real history of it. So I would say going back to Have a Nice Day.
Sure.
Prior to that, wrestling journalism was kayfabe. Bill Apter made up most of the interviews that he wrote. And I'm not demeaning Bill Apter in any way whatsoever. I love Bill Apter. I've hung out with Bill Apter. But that was the wrestling magazines. It was selling the angles and it was promoting the stories. All those top 10 lists. It was all about promoting. Whatever promoters were trying to promote. But actually telling the real history, we're playing catch up. I mean, baseball has been chronicled. As baseball happened from the beginning. Same with hockey. Same with football. And every other sport. So we're playing catch up, and we're having to go back and fill in gaps. And there's a lot of gaps that may never be filled. People's archives disappeared. The people are no longer around to tell the real stories.
Right.
If they were around, I always say this about the Black Panther. It's like, if I had been able to interview the Black Panther, he probably would have kayfabed me on everything.
Probably, yeah.
I mean, that was just the era. That was who they were. So, so we're playing catch up. We're trying to fill in the blanks. As more and more newspapers come online, guys are digging in and looking for more results, different places. I've thought about, and actually, if you guys remember Judy Ray Hendricks from OVW a couple years ago, but she's from out in Appalachia, Eastern Kentucky. She trained with Bobby Blaze. She and I have talked about doing a history of Appalachian wrestling. Those newspaper archives, they're in libraries right now. They're on microfilms, just like the Courier Journal was when I first wrote Bluegrass Brawlers.
Right.
So it would take forever to go find them. But if they ever come online, then that's, we're going to be able to fill in more of those gaps and find out what was really happening with wrestling in Ashland, Kentucky, or Pikeville and places like that. So, But yeah, getting back to Jim, I walked up and introduced myself to him at a Comic-Con and told him what I was doing. And once he caught on what I was doing, realized, oh, this isn't just a fan coming to see me and I could possibly sell a book. He was really interested in what I was doing because I was dropping some information that he had never heard. So he gave me his card.
How did that feel? How did that?
At the moment, you're playing it really cool and everything, and then you freak out when you walk
Yeah,
away.
okay, yeah, I could only
I've
imagine.
gotten real good at that over the years, let me tell you.
Could only imagine.
With different people. But, he invited me over to the house. I got to go in the Fortress of Solitude. We spent an afternoon just kind of going through things, and he was sharing different things with me. I shared research with him. Again, he came to the library with me one day, in downtown, which is real funny. We went out so he could take a smoke break, and we get on the elevator to go back up to the where the research area was. This old guy gets on the elevator. I don't take this the wrong way, mister, but you look like a guy that used to be on TV wrestling. He says, well, I was, sir. Himself. So, no, very kind mind, very generous man. Again, he's got his hot buttons, So,
Sure. We all do.
But when you want to talk wrestling and everything like that, he's all ears and loves to hear it. Always happy to share information. I've always enjoyed. I don't get to see him near as often as I did get to see him recently at the Queen of the Ring premiere, and talk with him and stuff. So that was a lot of fun. But just a wealth of knowledge. He's forgotten more than most people ever know about wrestling, no, he's always been great.
Awesome.
Going back to the point you just made about baseball being written about and football and all that. Growing up, I was a huge baseball fan, and I read all sorts of books that were written in the 50s about, Murderers Row and the Yankees back in the 20s and all that. And there really hasn't been that as far as wrestling goes. And tying into what you said earlier about the Macho Man and Miss Elizabeth, there is currently a Miss Elizabeth exhibit now.
Yes.
In your opinion, what is her place in Kentucky wrestling history and then as a greater whole?
I mean, I was so excited to see this exhibit. I actually reached out to the museum as soon as I heard about it. Spoke with the museum director and did a story on my blog about it. And I'm planning to go out and visit with them and share some of the stuff that I've got on Kentucky wrestling, as well as see the exhibit for myself. What she told me was really cool. That I guess some family members had passed away, and somebody decided, well, let's donate. They had a couple of her dresses, and they donated them to this museum. And the museum was like, we don't know who this is or what to do with them. So they put them out on display, and people are flocking to the museum.
Well, rightly so, yeah.
So, but no, a very important piece of Kentucky history. I mean, she's a Kentucky girl, born and raised in Frankfort, and has a place, along with all the other, the wrestling legends, that have come out of Kentucky. Earlier podcast, they escaped me. Betty Jo Hawkins, young lady from Ashland, Kentucky, going back to the 1950s. Bobby Blaze out of Ashland, Kentucky. Terry Garvin Sims, another person from Kentucky. Kenny Starmaker Bolin. You can't talk about wrestling in Kentucky without Kenny. But I mean, yeah, there's Hillbilly Jim.
Of course.
Yeah. She belongs in the conversation with all of them. Miss Elizabeth is the quintessential valet. I don't know that anybody... Yeah. When you think about the valet role, not the manager role, but the valet role, I mean, she's the gold standard. I remember my dad years ago telling me, they had a competition, to see what's the best chocolate in the world, and Hershey's was the standard they compared it all to. Are you better or worse than her? Miss Elizabeth is that standard.
Absolutely.
I think she's a Hall of Famer. I think she's somebody who needs to be remembered and needs to have her story honored and told right. It's be difficult to do with her family gone and with her gone as well. So, and it's sad that she died as young as she did. Mm-hmm. But no, I think a very important piece of wrestling history.
There are very few performers in wrestling who it is so much easier to identify with and like emotionally compare yourself to than Miss Elizabeth.
Yeah,
like she really had this very, very special ability to connect to people with without ever saying a word, really, with just these like wonderful facial expressions and just how kind of elegant and classy she was as a person,
and not even competing in the ring once.
And not to mention I will say this on this podcast, the legitimate most emotional moment in the history of North American wrestling is Macho Man and Miss Elizabeth reuniting.
Yeah.
If I'm having a bad day, I will turn that one on, and it'll make my day better. So I think that kind of the history of OVW and the WWE thing has been really expanded and talked about in a lot of different places. A question I want to ask you is what happened right after WWE pulled out?
What after that? It certainly did leave a void. There was a partnership with TNA for a time, mm-hmm. And you had you had an outstanding group of talent that came through. You had Rob Terry, you had Rockstar Spud, and mm-hmm. Jamin Olivencia, who of course is back. Yep. Nobody's happier to see Jamin Olivencia at OVW than me. Let me tell you. There was some great talent came through. You had. Jesse Goddard. That was when Jesse Goddard came to OVW, was because of that TNA connection initially. And there was a lot of great talent that came through at that time. Dylan Bosick's another guy you could talk about. So it was certainly a period of transition and trying to keep things going. I know a number of different people kind of stepped in to kind of help Danny here and there and everything like that. And you had some years where it was just kind of maintaining and kind of keep it going. Guy that I've heard credited a lot with keeping that place afloat in between those, developmental times and when Al bought it is Adam Revolver. Guy really doesn't, people don't know just how much he's done behind the scenes, and really just kind of keeping that ship afloat for years and years. When Danny was like, anytime an old buddy of his would come walking in and go, "Hey, Danny, how you doing?" "Hey, I'm doing fine. You want to buy a wrestling school?" But right place, right time. Al Snow was there, and I'm absolutely 100% the right guy to take it over.
Yeah.
And we see what's happened, and it'll be interesting to see with the change of hands of ownership again, what's going to go on. Definitely hope that they keep. I mean, that local tradition is so important, and that local connection with the fans. As you guys said, I mean, this town has been in love with wrestling for well over 100 years, and we're not used to not having wrestling around. OVW it's a special place, and it's a place that. People, there's a third generation now coming to see, people that were watching initially in the beginning. They're bringing, not just their kids, but their grandkids now.
At this point. The
little kids. It's a family friendly show. It's something, you can bring the whole family, everybody to enjoy it. My daughter started coming with me a couple years ago. Nobody was screaming louder than her except maybe Gracie. But, it's just a very, very special place, and it's great to see it, kind of come back, and it continues to have its ebbs and flows and things like that. But I think they found their groove post Netflix. I think they got a little overeager with ticket prices there for a while. I certainly couldn't afford it every week, and that was why I quit coming every week. But I try to get there as often as I can again. I mean, for $12 you can't beat it for a Thursday night's entertainment. And I'll give this plug too. If you're looking for a place to stop and eat on the way, Mi Sueno over there on Bardstown Road. Best Cuban sandwich in Louisville.
We pass it every time we go.
Yeah.
And I've seen it.
And I think we've had this talk more than once.
Yeah. Now, the Cuban sandwich is the one thing you got to have to wait for. Everything else is right there, ready, quick serve. They'll scoop up your rice and whatever, so like that. So you got to wait about 5-10 minutes for that Cuban sandwich. It's worth it, though.
Oh, we got 5 or 10 minutes.
Oh, yeah. We got an hour.
For a good food. We got all
ahead,
time in the world.
Leave a little early. Let me know you're coming. I'll meet you.
Definitely.
That sounds like a plan, yeah.
I've got a couple more before we head out here. The first one is, what is your favorite thing you've written?
Oh, gosh. That's a hard one. I really enjoyed this last year, getting another Kids at Grindhouse. And the new book, We Are Grindhouse. Essentially what I did was I got all access behind the scenes for a full year. Grindhouse Pro Wrestling, Too Tough Tony owns the arena over in Jeffersonville. He started Grindhouse with Rudy Switchblade years and years ago. That's where Billy Starks trained.
Yeah.
Haley J will tell you she's Grindhouse. I mean, Ronnie Roberts was her first trainer. And continues to be. Right? She showed up and trained a couple of times. In fact, there's a story in the book about her and Tiffany showing up one Wednesday night. And Ronnie blowing a snot rocket at Tiffany, and Tiffany almost throwing up. And so there's some great quotes from Haley J in there as well. She's real funny. But just getting to be behind the scenes and see what it's like in a wrestling class, and see what it's like in the locker room, and learning the true meaning of cards subject to change, and Ronnie having to shuffle things around, and watching a kid like Dallas Edwards have that day, where he wrestles 11 matches. The lovely Miss Larkin, who everybody knows at OVW. I was there at one of the first times she pulled out the knife. There's a chapter called "Larkin Has a Knife." When the knife originated, and see Vanessa Holiday. Vanessa Holiday is somebody OVW fans may see at some point. You are almost about to see her, I think, but she's going to have a baby later on this year with Tyler Lee Deputy, her boyfriend.
Okay.
But watching her, last summer she kind of flipped the switch and got it, and just started to come alive. Had a lot of momentum towards the end of the year. Another guy, Robert Ketchum. Oh my gosh. Say Ronnie describes it as like fans now. The fans know if they hear Robbie's music, they see Robbie coming, there's going to be a car wreck. And watching him, he was part of a tag team that he had to go solo, and seeing him kind of come alive. Again, that's my latest book, but that's one I certainly enjoyed. I always go back to, people ask me, other favorites. Black Panther was one that was a dream project to be able to do. I got my hands on a lot of the Black Panther's actual, a pair of his wrestling boots are now at the Fraser Museum because I was able to get my hands on them. I have a few things of his, articles of his still. I've got a framed photo of him and Jack Pfeffer clowning around where Pfeffer's pretending to stab him with a knife. Jim Cornette's got the second one of that series. Mars Bennett is one that I really enjoyed. A lady wrestler from the 1950s. Most people will not know who she was. She was a pinup girl, and then she was a circus star before that. She wrestled. Unfortunately, died in a car accident very, very young, and didn't really have a chance to pursue her career further. Well, obviously, Jimmy, car accident. And then Chris Candido was a lot of fun to write as well, except for that ending.
Right.
And Tracy Smothers is another one that I always go back to as well. And I worked with Tracy on that book while he was going through chemo and he was battling cancer the first time. And I mean, if you're from around this area, if you've been to any promotion in Kentucky, Kentuckiana area, you know who Tracy Smothers is.
I got the chance to see him once, and I just happened, my grandmother had died and I had to go back home, my hometown. Not a lot to do in my hometown. Go to the local grocery store. Sure enough, independent wrestling flyer right there on the grocery store window. Featuring, you know, the wild-eyed Southern boy, Tracy Smothers. I said, well, I know what I'm doing. Yep. $10 later, I saw Tracy Smothers. It was awesome. You know,
we were talking about Dallas Edwards earlier, too. He told me a story. He was at, I think it was a D1W show in New Albany, and he was little, you know, little, he's smaller, but he's little kid at the time. And Tracy gets in that ring and goes, hey, anybody says Tracy sucks one more time, everybody dies. And the guy next to him starts yelling, Tracy sucks. Dallas like, I was so scared. I ran. I hit the bathroom.
So the second question would be, where can we find all of your writing?
EatSleepWrestle.com. I've got a blog on there where I've got a number of interviews with OVW folks as well as some other folks around the independent scene. If there's somebody whose story I want to know, I'm going to reach out to them. I just recently did an interview with Black Diamond Entertainment, 3 very proud OVW alumni, Devin DeVille, Ty Vance, and Louis Boudreau. And actually, I just interviewed Joe Cooley as well.
Great.
I pulled Joe aside one day. I said, I want to know your story. He's like, you can talk to these kids. I've talked to a bunch of these kids. I want to know who you are.
Sounds like
very much
the
fans,
Joe, yeah.
I think the fans want to know who you are as well. So he was gracious enough to give me an interview, and just a great guy. But you can come read about OVW. You can read about these wrestlers, and you can find most of my books on there as well. If my books aren't on there, there's one you're looking for. It'll be on Amazon. But yeah, my Louisville books are up there. The other ones we mentioned: Tracy Smothers, Chris Candido, Grindhouse, Mars Minute, Elvira Snodgrass, Jude Byers, The Black Panther, Badman Pondo. They're all there.
Oh, you got a Badman Pondo book too?
I do. I have a Badman Pondo book.
Wow.
I would tell you, I had to persuade him to do a book because somebody recently asked me the question, how did you fact check Badman Pondo's book? I was like, I didn't. Because every time Badman Pondo would tell me a story and I would be about to go, nah, here's the photo, here's the video.
Man.
He's got it all documented. So, but I had to persuade him to do it. He finally went and was actually, I think it was at an NXT show, and he saw me and said, all right, let's write a book. So we spent the next year writing a book. It's still one of my best sellers. Everybody loves it. So
no, I can only imagine.
He's having, I don't know if you guys know, he's having a renaissance right now.
Yeah.
He's in Japan. He's been in Japan for 6 months. He's got married. And every day I look on Facebook, you know, Akira's over there wrestling with him. Attila Khan's over there wrestling with him. Dale Patrick's is over there. Shane Mercer's over there wrestling. I mean, he's just, the whole Midwest is just cycling through Japan thanks to Badman Pondo right now.
Which
it's
is great.
Awesome.
Gotta love that.
Yeah.
Guys, on the way out here, not kidding, there's a lot of people who think they can write about wrestling. There's not a lot of people who do it as well as John Cosper. John, you are one of the best wrestling writers in all of the wrestling writing I've ever read. I don't like to give compliments, especially ones that aren't warranted. I really love your writing. I think you're really fantastic. Guys, if you've enjoyed any part of this interview, eatsleepwrestle.com. Check out his blogs. Check out some of his books. John Cosper is the king of Kentucky wrestling and wrestling writing in general, really.
I appreciate it, guys. Thank you so much.
No
Thank
problem.
you.
Thank you.